Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Mel from MelDidItHerself, and I'm a social service worker turned furniture refinisher, DIYer, small business owner, and content creator. I've learned everything I know about these industries thanks to people who shared their knowledge on the internet. So I'm paying it forward by bringing you my tips, lessons learned, and sharing my journey in this space with you. So thank you so much for being here, being curious, and being a lifelong learner like me. Let's hop into it. What's up, my friends and fellow busybees? I decided to lose the welcome because I realized after jumping back into my armchair expert binge, I was completely ripping it off from there and I had no idea where I had initially gotten it from, but here we are. So, what's up? I hope your week is going great and you are drinking enough water, you're moving your body, and you're checking in with yourself when you need to, because those are all important things in life. I first off want to say thank you so much for the support that I've gotten from the podcast and surrounding the podcasts to date. Today marks the official beginning of season 2 of Busybee Refinishing, and I have absolutely loved it so far. I've loved the feedback that I've gotten from all of you, and I've loved that you're getting value from this and you're feeling like you're more understood in your business and in your struggles, because that is exactly why I set out to do this podcast, because I knew that we would all have more similarities than differences, no matter where we live in the world. And getting messages from you guys letting me know that episodes are resonating with you, or that you're relating to what I'm saying, or you're getting encouraged and energized by my words are always so awesome to hear. So if you are someone who has done so, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you're listening and you found value from the podcast and you've been enjoying it, I would love it if you would leave a rating on the platform that you're listening on today. And if there's an option to do so, please leave a review and let me know what you're enjoying most. I also always love seeing you share episodes that you're listening to in your stories on Instagram while you're out sanding or you're off on your hot girl walks. So be sure to tag me at MelDidItHerself when you do so that I can give you a shout out on my stories too, because as we learned last week, we all rise by lifting others. Okay, so I wanted to start off season 2 with a bang and answer one of the most common questions that I receive. I get this question on my posts on social media, in my DMs from people who are tackling a piece and they want some advice or insight. And lately, just when people are walking by the house and they see me painting and refinishing in the driveway and they stop by to chat about it, which is becoming much more frequent now that I'm out there so much. But I love it. And that question is how to get a flawless finish on your piece when you're hand painting furniture. And you can see from the title that I'm calling this a flawless-ish finish, which is going to be a tongue twister that I know I will regret. But this is the first thing that I would like to say. Don't believe everything you see on social media. I hope you've learned that lesson already in life, but if not, I'm here to tell you or to at least reiterate it. Particularly after last week's episode. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen. Community over competition. It was great. I received a lot of messages from people saying that they really appreciated it because they are hard on themselves and they don't feel like their pieces are as good as some of the people that they see doing furniture refinishing online. And that absolutely breaks my heart. But also, I know exactly how you feel, girlfriend, because I have been there before too. But I'm here to tell you, because nobody said it to me, but I had to come to realize it, is that a lot of what you're seeing isn't quite the way that it appears. Allow me to explain. These people that you see on Instagram that have these beautifully curated, crafted feeds, that have these glorious furniture pieces that are glorious, they are altering their photos. They're editing them, they touch them up, they're brightening it, they're removing things on the walls behind them, they're using lighting that they've bought. They are photos that are not the same as what you're seeing in front of you in your furniture pieces. So don't be comparing your work that you're seeing in front of you in harsh lighting with your own two eyes up close to somebody's carefully curated feed that has immaculate lighting and is filled with photos far away from a piece that I can assure you is very deliberately staged. And it took a lot of time and effort to do those things. And they're hard things to do. They're beautiful photos, and that should be taken into account, that is a lot of effort that goes into creating those feeds. But if you're comparing yourself to them, you will only end up feeling badly about yourself and your work, and I'm here to tell you that you do not need to be. And of course, there are people out there that don't alter their photos and maybe are producing pieces that are close to being what you would consider perfect, but I can assure you that they didn't start out there. And we'll touch on that later. What I will say is, there are many things that you can do to achieve a great finish when you're hand painting furniture. But if you want it to be absolutely perfect, like really, really perfect, it's going to take a lot of time, patience, and probably a couple touch-ups and redos. And I hope that other furniture painters listening are nodding their heads in agreement and nobody's like looking to the side like, what the hell is this girl talking about? Mine are always perfect. Because if that's you, please send me a DM and tell me what you're doing to achieve this absolutely flawless finish every time. And again, I repeat, when hand painting. Because if you're spraying a piece, it's much easier to get that flawless finish. I do have a paint sprayer. I definitely can attest that I probably haven't given it a fair shake in terms of time inputted into getting used to it and getting to learn it. But the one thing that did turn me off a little bit initially from spraying is that it takes away the part that I love most about furniture refinishing. I really love, and I think others feel the same, just getting into that state of flow and getting lost in painting and getting some of that paint therapy in that we all love. And the sprayer doesn't really allow for that in the same way. So for now at least, I stick to hand painting and the occasional roller action. And I do intend on getting more used to the sprayer in the coming months, and it is great, honestly, for those who like using it. It's definitely more efficient, and again, it will give you that more uniform and likely closer to perfect finish. So keep that in mind if you are really trying to achieve that, because it can really be a great tool to do so. But I think a lot of people who are customers and clients and are looking to receive and purchase refinished furniture, they can appreciate that these pieces are pre-loved and that they have a long history and lifetime. And they know that that comes with some imperfections, like all of us have. But despite our imperfections, we are beautiful and loved and valuable, just like the beautiful creations that we do. So keep that in mind as we move forward, that just because you're seeing a couple of slight imperfections here and there when you look at it in a certain lighting, at a certain angle, don't beat yourself up over it, and know that there are plenty of people out there that will absolutely find that to be a valuable and beautiful piece regardless. Those are the people that are your target audience, your client avatar, and the ones that you want to foster relationships with, because they can appreciate the value that comes with that piece, besides the fact that it's just probably a little less expensive than getting a factory finish at a store. But all that to say, there are absolutely some things that you can do to ensure that you're getting as close to a flawless finish as possible. The flawless-ish finish that I mentioned earlier. Yep, I'm going to hate that term for sure. First off, it starts with proper prep work. If you missed it, go revisit episode 7, where I went into full detail on how to properly prep a piece before painting or staining, because that goes in depth on the steps and some tips that I have on how to do so. There are some other things that you can also do that will help, and the first one that I typically tell people is to always use the right tools. Using good quality paintbrushes that are made for the intended purpose will make all the difference. When I first started out doing furniture painting and refinishing, I would try and keep my expenses low, like I think we all do. And so at first, I was just buying paintbrushes from Dollarama and finding the most inexpensive ones that I could, because I knew that they would get the job done and they wouldn't break the bank. That was a mistake. I now only use those for chip brushes if I'm trying to get a rough finish on a piece and I'm looking for texture. So that should tell you something on the finish that I was getting when using those products. Choosing brushes that are made specifically for furniture painting and refinishing and that are the perfect shape and size and angle that you need to achieve the product that you're working on will help you out so much in the long run, and you'll thank yourself later. Another thing worth noting is that those brushes tend to lose their bristles often, so that's something that can impact the finish as well. If you're painting and then you notice that a bunch of bristles ended up in the paint finish, you're going to have to get those out hopefully before the paint dries. And then if you don't notice them and you forget, you're going to have to peel it out and there'll be that imprint of the bristle in the paint, which will result in more texture in your finish ultimately, or more repairs that you're having to do later. And you don't need a lot of brushes, but I recommend having a few go-to ones for the various uses that you come across often. And this will be an upcoming episode where I go over the types that I recommend and my favorite brushes personally. But if you want some details in the meantime, I do have a reel that I posted recently that goes over the different types and some of my favorites at this point in time. So that's over on my Instagram at MelDidItHerself if you want to check it out. And back to proper prep work. So after you put your primer on, if you were going to be using primer in your project, make sure that you are lightly sanding after every coat. This is going to make sure that the base is as silky smooth as possible to lay down your paint on top of. You can use a high grit sandpaper either with an electric sander or just by hand or using a sanding sponge. I recommend anything 220 grit or higher. If I have it on hand, I'll typically choose around 300 grit when doing this, just because it's so silky smooth and it will help get rid of any texture that may be there. So after you lightly sand and you even out that finish, make sure that you're also removing any dust that may be there, whether it's just from sanding initially before you put on the primer or after you're sanding down the primer in between coats. Because if you leave it there and then you start putting your next coat of primer or first coat of paint, I suppose, that dust is going to get into the product and mix together, and it's going to create texture that you will later have to deal with. So help yourself out and make sure to either wipe or brush away the dust and get it off the piece. Once you get to the point of actually painting, my biggest tip and number one rule of thumb is to always go in with multiple light, thin coats of paint instead of trying to build up coverage right off the bat on the piece. This will ensure that you're not using too much product and it will end up in the smoothest finish that you can get. When you're dipping your paintbrush into the paint, you need much less paint on your paintbrush than you think you do too. I would say maybe 2 fingers worth of paint up to the bristles, like up the bristles, I should say, at most. And I always recommend once you dip your brush in to wipe it off a bit on the sides of the container that you're using. Again, it's better to have to build it up over time once each coat is dried than having a big gloopy mess that's taking forever to dry, and then you can just tell that it's not going to even be uniform or flat once it does dry. For whatever paint product you're using, I always recommend that you read the directions carefully to make sure that you're following the recommended use for the product. And it also doesn't hurt if you're feeling unsure or uncertain in taking on the piece, or if it's your first time doing this, to check out the brand's website to see if they have any how-to videos or tutorials, or even on their social media channels that let you know how to get the best finish and results using their products. They are the experts, so they'll let you know how they created the product to perform best. YouTube is also a great resource for this. And this is because some paints have certain tricks that help you to get the best finish when you're using them. For example, I often use Fusion Mineral Paint on my pieces, and it works best when you go back with one long stroke after you get the actual coverage on the piece. This was something that I had to learn because at first I would go through and I would have sort of like lines in my finish where my brush strokes had ended and then I started off again. And if I had just gone through once after I got the paint on the piece and did longer brush strokes from one edge to the other on the piece, I would have avoided that learning curve. And again, with Fusion, they recommend doing multiple light coats instead of going in with one big coat and trying to get that coverage early on. So if I had done my research properly when I first started using the product, I would have known that when first jumping in. Another thing when reading the directions is to take into account and to follow precisely the dry and recoat times for the paint and also the temperature requirements. If you go in before the paint is fully dried to put a second coat on, this can pull up your first coat and end up in a really yucky, gloopy mess. And some types of paint, if they're more of an enamel-based paint, have very specific instructions where you might only be able to recoat within the hour or after 24 or 48 hours. It's all based in science, so I'm here to tell you that they do know better than you do, so just listen to them. The reason you want to take into account the temperature requirements is because the paint will not fully dry or dry properly if it's too hot or too humid or too cold, which are all issues that we get here in Canada and face when trying to paint in the garage. Right now, it's the whole humidity issue. And even if you leave the piece for an extended period of time, thinking that that will allow it to fully dry because you're giving it a longer dry time because you know that it's hotter out, the paint ultimately will not perform the way that it's intended to. So keep that in mind. And there's nothing really that you can do other than trying to temperature control your space or just waiting for a day with better weather. But I highly recommend that you don't rush and try and work on the piece if you don't have those ideal environmental conditions, because ultimately you'll just run into issues, whether it be immediately while working on the piece or down the line when you realize that you don't have as good of durability or lasting power in your finish. Another thing that will help you to get that flawless-ish finish when hand painting is to not skip the step of a top coat. Not only does this offer added durability for your piece long term, but this also helps to give it more of a seamless, flawless finish and can be the difference of it looking like something that was just hand painted in passing by someone who doesn't really know what they're doing and by someone who is more of an expert. One paint that I've found that this makes a humongous difference with is specifically the color Coal Black by Fusion Mineral Paint. It can have a tendency to really show off those imperfections and brush strokes just because it is such a pigmented black, but once you get a coat of polyurethane over it, particularly if you mix in some of the paint into the top coat to avoid getting a milky finish, it looks absolutely divine and so much more sleek and modern. And Fusion is a paint that has a built-in acrylic resin top coat, so you technically don't have to put a top coat, and the instructions don't tell you that it's a requirement. But again, just always put that added top coat, use that extra product, make that added investment because it will help with the durability. And again, it's going to help to give you that flawless finish that you can be proud of when you list for sale. I also, as a warning and recommendation, want to remind you that practice does make perfect, and I don't want you to be discouraged if the first time that you do a piece it doesn't look flawless, because we all started from somewhere. And if it doesn't turn out absolutely perfect the first time, think of the fact that you now have something to compare to in order to track your progress as you practice and you improve your craft and get better. Some pieces that I look back on from when I first started out, I want to cringe a little bit. But ultimately, it lets me know that I've now learned more, researched more, listened, and taken on people's recommendations or tips. And it has resulted in me providing a better product to my clients and being more well-rounded in what I do and what I can offer today. And the people who bought those pizzas back in the day never complained either. So take that into account too, that you're your own worst critic, and the things that you're noticing, somebody else may not even notice ever. And they may just be looking at that piece being like, wow, that looks so good. I'm so happy that I have that in my home and that I found this amazing find. So again, practice makes perfect. They say it takes 10,000 hours to master a craft. So if you put it an hour into painting your first piece and it's not quite up to par with what you imagined, just don't stop there. It will get better. And something that you may not know about me, I love little motivational messages. They literally always get me fired up, and I keep a running list of ones that are especially catchy or speak to me in the Notes app on my phone. So I'm going to end every podcast episode with one of those that I've noted down over the years in hopes that you leave our time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever comes your way this week. So this week's Mels motivational message is, find the courage to let go of what you can't change. So when we're talking about trying to get a flawless finish on our pieces and you're working on a piece that just has something about it that's especially finicky or maybe isn't well aligned and you've done everything that you possibly can to try and fix it and you're harping down on this one little, maybe it's a nick that you can't quite get the wood filler to fill all the way and it keeps shrinking and it's all you notice when you look at the piece, but otherwise it looks pristine. Find the courage to let go of what you can't change. You gave it your all. And like I said before, done is better than perfect. And I know that sounds bad, but if you've done all you can to get it to that state of perfection or as close to it, because nothing is perfect in this world, then you did your very best. And I guarantee you that there is somebody out there that will appreciate all the time, all the effort, all the energy that you put into that piece, because your care will shine through, like I said, to the right people who are your target audience that appreciate refinished furniture for the history and the life that it's been through. Find the courage to let go of what you can't change. And I always like to make these messages relate back to our everyday lives because I think that's a little bit more relatable, because there's probably some people listening who don't necessarily do painting and refinishing but are maybe just interested in tuning in or learning about it. But think about your life and the things that you stress about, the things that maybe make you anxious, that fill up your thoughts, that keep you up at night, that are the first things you're thinking about and worrying about in the morning. Take a second, think about all those stressors that you have, and now think of how many of those things you can control. How many of those things do you directly have control over? I bet you it's not that many of them. I bet a lot of things are completely out of your control. And I bet that's scary. I know that's scary because I have those things in my life too. But I want you to take a minute, think about all those things that you have, and take a deep breath and let go of them. Find that courage within you to let go of the things that you cannot change, because you're adding interest and worry to something that you have absolutely no control over. And you got enough things going on in your life. You don't need to have those in your brain. You're trying to remember the kid's doctor's appointment. You're trying to remember, oh, what was that thing I said I needed to pick up next time I go to the grocery store? You're trying to think of the chores. Oh, I forgot there's laundry down in the washing machine that I need to put in the dryer. Oh, I have to check my emails. We have so many things day to day that our stupid little tiny brains are trying to remember. You do not need those things to be taking up any space or any emotion and energy in your day. Find the things that you can't change. Let go of them. You're better than that. Okay, if you are enjoying the podcast so far, I would love if you would go to the podcast page on whatever platform you're listening on today. And like I said, leave me a rating and review, preferably a 5-star review, but I'll leave that part up to you. And the reason for that is it just really helps get this pushed out to more people to discover and to join us on this ever-growing furniture refinishing ride with all of the fellow busybees that we have hanging out here every single week. All right, that's it for now. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you guys next week.